This video begins the HTTP methods section. This section contains 4 videos. First, we'll cover using the head method to get information about a server, and then the post method to log in. Once you can automate the login process, you can now break into web servers, and the challenges here are brute forcing a short pin and brute forcing a pin of unknown length. So first, using the head method. We'll cover using Chrome Developer Tools to see how a browser works, and understanding the HTTP request and response process. We'll then code HTTP head requests in Python and HTTP GET requests in Python. Chrome Developer Tools is part of a browser. You can get it by clicking the 3-dot icon in the upper right, and then More Tools. In Developer Tools, this lets you see what the browser is really doing when it communicates with a server. An HTTP request is just a series of text lines sent to the server on port 80, and the first one is a GET that tells it you want to get a web page, and the second one specifies the host you're trying to communicate with by fully qualified domain name. The browser sends several extra lines that identify the version of the browser and have other information that is not always needed. The server sends a reply, which begins with a header, and the first line of the header is the most important to us that tells us the status. If the status is 200, that means everything is okay. The server understood the request and it is delivering what you asked for. Then again, there are extra lines here with things like the date and the versions of the server software that are being used. The request must contain these 2 lines, a GET and a host. This first word is the method, which might be GET or head or post, and then you specify the address for the page you want. A slash means you just want the default root page for the website, which is typically index.html. So let's take a look at this in Chrome. So here's a web page, same one we've been talking about before on the same server. And if I open up Chrome Developer Tools here, it gives me a pane with many options to show me details about this page. And what I want is to be on the Network tab, which will show the requests and responses. In order to get them to appear, I have to refresh the page. This very simple page has only one item that was requested, comes from one request and one response. And you can see them down here. Let me zoom in. All right, so here's the request headers, and the Chrome Developer Tools have made some attempt to make this look prettier, but I want it to look the way it really looked when it was sent, so I view source. And now you can see there's a GET line and a host line, followed by other lines that aren't important to us right now. And the response is here. Again, you can use view source to see it in its plain form. And there's the HTTP 1.1 200 OK, followed by other information showing that this request was correctly received and understood, and the server was able to provide the information that was asked for, which was that web page. A head request looks just the same, but it starts with head instead of GET. And what that does is simply identify the server type and version. All it sends is the HTTP header in response. And to do that, we write a script here that is very much like the port scanner you did in the previous section. You import the socket library, create a socket object, set the timeout, which is not really necessary, but it helps make the program less frustrating if something goes wrong. Connect to a target, the same URL on port 80, because this is a simple old-fashioned web page that uses HTTP, not the encrypted version, HTTPS, which would be on port 443. And then you send the request, head/HTTP/1.1. This stands for carriage return line feed, which is the recommended way to end a line. And here's host, which specifies the URL, the target, which is going to be packetpub.samsclass.info, and then carriage return line feed, followed by another carriage return line feed on an empty line, which is the signal to the server that this request is complete and should now be acted on. So I print on the screen the request that was sent so you can see it, and then print whatever comes back after the word received, and then close the socket. So let's take a look at that. That's the head method. So here we are. If I look at the script, head, there it is. I'm just to connect to the target on port 80. I send 2 lines of text with these carriage return line feeds, and then I print what comes back. So if I run that with Python, it sends those two lines, head and host, and what it receives is 200 OK, followed by the date and the version of Ubuntu and Apache I'm using, and other such information. So that's a successful exchange with the server under my control, scripted in Python. Now let's move on and do the same thing with get. All you have to do is change the word head to get, and instead of just getting the server version, you'll get the same header followed by the source code of the page. So the script looks exactly the same except for this one word, which is get. And let's run that one and talk about it. If you want to see the script, it's here. Connect to the same server on the same port, sends a request that's the same except for the method, which is now get, and then prints whatever comes back. So if you run that one, you get a long response that scrolls off the screen. So let me scroll back up and we can see what it did. So here I send the get, which is just these two lines of text followed by an empty line. And here's what comes back. A 200 OK, followed by other information about the server, including things like the version and the length of the data that's coming below. This much is called the HTTP header. And this is the source code of the web page in HTML. If you've written web pages, you'll be familiar with this. That specifies to the browser how to display the visible page. We've now written our own little browser for text only. It sends our own method and lets us see the full response from the server. Browsers typically conceal this part from you because it's not interesting to the user. All the user wants to see is the page rendered from this information. All right, that starts us off.